Hello everyone, welcome back to Major Hi-Fi. I'm Luke. In this video we're going to be talking about Campfire's new IEM, the Holocene. So in my last video, we talked about the Mammoth, which was one of two new releases from Campfire, both of which come with glow-in-the-dark cables. And this is the more expensive of the two at $649 as opposed to the Mammoth, which runs for $549. Campfire also released two other IEMs only like a week or so ago, which were the Satsuma and the Honeydew, and I will link to my videos on those below. And those run for about half the prices of both of these. So let's start out by opening up the box and looking at what's inside. All right, so it's basically the same as we get with most Campfires. We get a carrying case, and similar to the one with the Mammoth, it is very brightly colored. It's a real loud looking carrying case. I said 80s for the last one. I don't know what you want to call it. Definitely a statement, not gonna be for everyone. Personally, I love it. It's very my style. I know I'm wearing all white right now, but I don't always. And then in addition, before I take out the actual IEMs, let's just look at what else we get here, which is also the same as we get with all Campfire IEMs. We have these drawstring bags, and inside of these we get some extra ear tips. You know, we get foam ones, rubber ones, and whatnot. All right, so here are the Holocene. They've got this nice brown color to them. It's also slightly metallic. Standard shape for all of Campfire's IEMs. It's this kind of geometric angular shape, like I say in all of my videos about their IEMs. Probably repeating myself a million times here. They don't always look the most comfortable because of how angular they are, but they are more comfortable than they might appear. And they stay in your ears real well, and they fit real well, so big fan of that. Seems to me just like the standard Campfire fit. If you've ever tried one of their IEMs, this is the same as always. And if you haven't, then you shouldn't have any problem getting these to fit in your ears and to stay there and to feel comfortable and not over, like, you know, rubbing up against your ears or anything like that. These are not quite as bright of a color as we've seen from Campfire recently, but I think the brown is nice. It's very natural looking. And then also we have these MMCX connectors, which are clear because this part glows in the dark, along with the Campfire logo, along with the end of the cable. The 3.5mm termination also glows, and this kind of helps for me more with finding them in the dark or something like that than it does anything stylistic. But you know, if you are, I don't know, wearing your IEMs at night or something, then I guess you'll look a little bit extra cool. Design-wise, these use 3 balanced armatures, 1 for the highs, 2 for the mids and lows, and then we also have the 3D printed acoustic chamber, as most of Campfire's IEMs do, and this is supposed to basically just give the sound a very well-designed space to bounce around in and make it sound better, you know, that kind of stuff. The shell is made of aluminum, so these are extra sturdy. And these have a frequency response of 5 Hz to 28 kHz and an impedance of just 5.4 ohms, so please be careful because these things are super loud. All right, so let's talk about how these sound. So for their soundstage, these, like a lot of other Campfire IEMs, are a bit above average in terms of how much width and kind of atmosphere we're going to get from them. The outskirts, sort of, you know, the outer areas of the stereo spectrum are super well represented on these. A lot of room for that ear candy to come through and really jump out and give you a really satisfying sensation. There's a great feel from left to right, front to back, just an overall really successful soundstage on these. It's one of those sound stages that gives the song a ton of room to breathe, and it's just gonna make every listen that extra level of kind of satisfying and immersive. Sound separation wise, I felt like these were mostly pretty good. They excelled in some areas more than others. This is not uncommon, I guess, but for me, I felt like these in terms of sounds that were kind of spread out, they were able to really layer them quite well. Sounds in the middle, you know, things that are more centered, had a bit more blend to them. This is not an uncommon thing to kind of leave the middle a little bit more blended or just to have a little bit of trouble separating the bottom as thoroughly. You don't really need to separate every single part of the song out super intensely, but these definitely had a little bit more crossover kind of going on in the middle. Not to the point that I was displeased, but definitely something that I just noticed, that these weren't like, you know, a complete just layer of, you know, every layer of sound has miles in between it. So, you know, but this also helps with cohesion and stuff like that, so there's always advantages to different ways of shaping a soundstage, and Campfire is not the kind of company that tends to do anything by accident, so this feels like it was probably an intentional kind of shaping of the imaging on these. Hey guys, Luke here. Just wanted to pop in and say that if you're enjoying this video, it would be great if you could subscribe and hit the bell to get notified when we make new content, and hit the like button, and leave us a comment if you have any suggestions or questions or anything like that. I would love to talk to you guys more. We would really love some help growing the channel, and you know, just want to make sure that we're reaching our audience and whatnot. So yeah, any support is greatly appreciated, and let's get back to the review. So low-end wise, if you want a bass-heavy IEM, these are probably not it for you. They focus more on the attack area, and while they do represent the low end, you know, pretty thoroughly, they're not going to really boost any of it. They're leaving it in a nice kind of exact, contained, and neutral way, so there's not a feeling of like extra low end, and arguably there's actually a little bit less than maybe is standard on a lot of other IEMs. These might be a little bit subdued in the low end actually, but that's kind of hard to say because it's very relative to what you're used to. To me though, it definitely felt like not a strong low end presence from these, but overall it didn't really feel like it was being cut. I would say that if you want, you know, not super intense bass, but you don't want it to be like super subdued, these could be a good middle ground between those two. It doesn't really have a super intense sub range. It does have the ability to kind of reach those sub-frequencies, but it's really not trying to bring them out prevalently at all. So definitely just a more natural bass tone to them. I will say if you provide them with an abundance of low end, they're capable of translating that with a bit more intensity. They're just not going to bring that intensity where it isn't already there, so they're not going to boost, basically. For example, I listen to a lot of Little Dragon, and they have a bunch of different sort of production styles that they use throughout their music, but on one song they have called Let Go, they have this huge kick drum and bass sound going on. And I was like, if this song doesn't sound really, really bassy on these IEMs, then it is clearly just cutting the bass to some pretty fair extent. But when I played it on the Holocene, it was still very intense, you know, more controlled maybe than I've heard it conveyed on other IEMs, but it was all still there, you know, the bass was all still there and it was full. So it's capable of giving you that intensity, but you really gotta throw a lot of bass at it to get that out of it. So if you're someone who listens to bass heavy music, this might still be able to translate that, but if you want music that's maybe a normal amount of bass to get pushed forward in that area, then these are not gonna do that for you. They're just gonna kind of give you whatever is there. Pretty honest bass response, I guess, on these is what I would say. All right, so the mid-range on these is cut in very specific areas, like those kind of pointed, pulled down cuts, which I appreciate. It makes these great at killing any excess resonance. And then the low mids felt a little bit accentuated, which created a very clean, clear warmth because we don't have a too much high mid kind of getting in the way of that fuller low mid that's going on, which is a nice balance. And the low mid feels pretty purified too, so there's really no excess mud or kind of congestion going on there, which I think is really important to do if you're going to boost areas of the low mid to also take back a few areas. I just mainly enjoyed how the mid-range on these kind of got rid of harshness without decreasing the presence of anything. So I listened to the song Watching You Fall by Hannah Cohen, which has been one of my favorite songs recently. And as much as I love this song, I will say the vocal recording is very harsh and can be a bit straining on the ears at times. And on these IEMs, I was finally able to listen to it without feeling like I was getting that kind of unpleasant sort of twinging in the ear. And that was very nice to, you know, get to hear my favorite song right now without having that kind of adverse side effect of it. So yeah, if you have problems with resonance or sharpness or you're sensitive to that, these could be great for that. And you know, the mid-range does have a slight bit of Campfire coloring to it, maybe not as much as I've heard on their other IEMs, but it's still there. Alright, so the high end, this is a bright IEM. If you want brightness, here you go. And it's not like so bright that it's maybe overwhelming, but it is bright enough to bring out textures you might not have known were there, to kind of, reveal any sort of tape hiss or anything. It doesn't leave anything behind in high frequencies whatsoever. I would say that the high end on these probably does walk that line between increased presence and shrillness. It's pretty boosted, but it never felt like it crossed the line for me, and that's a very important distinction to make. So if you do like brighter IEMs, these will definitely float your boat, and they should be able to do that without fatiguing your ears too much. But if you don't like high end, while these do have a good, clean high end response that isn't going to like totally, upset you, if you don't really like a bright IEM, I just might not look at these because they're pretty bright, and I just don't know if they would be for someone who is not into that, which I guess you might think is obvious, but there are some brighter IEMs that I feel like do it a certain way, where even if you don't want a lot of high end, you might still be into it, but I think that these are definitely catering to someone who likes a nice shiny sound. For example, I listened to Empire Ants by the Gorillaz, another one of my favorite songs right now, and it added this really nice but noticeable kind of extra shine to all the synthesizers in this song. And then on the vocals for it, it definitely added some gloss to them. Maybe not quite as intense as I saw on the synths, and it definitely retained their kind of warmth overall, but it brightened them up, which is not surprising. It just creates a very airy kind of detailed, highly articulate character to these IEMs, and for me that is something that I'm really attracted to, so I was a big fan of the high end on these. And then before I finish up, let's talk about how these compare to the Mammoth, which I reviewed in my last video and I will link below. Kind of similar to when I compared the Honeydew and the Satsuma. These are kind of opposites. The Holocene and the Mammoth, they kind of have very little in common. So the Holocene has a bright high end. The Mammoth is pretty dark in this area. The Holocene has a kind of subdued high mid-range, kind of accentuated low mid-range. The Mammoth has a kind of accentuated high mid-range and a kind of more neutral, flat low mid-range. And then the Holocene has a pretty organic, natural, neutral, arguably subdued low-end response. And the Mammoth has a kind of beefed up, more intense low-end response. So there's just not many similarities. I would say that maybe their most crossover would be in the mid-range, where they both, like I said, kind of have that Campfire signature sound, but because they don't have it quite as strongly as maybe other Campfire IEMs I've heard before, it's not quite as big of a relation. They do both sound to me like Campfire IEMs still. Like if you put on a blindfold and put these on me, I could probably tell you they were both from Campfire, but they're pretty different. And that reminds me, like I said, of how different the Satsuma and the Honeydew were in terms of just catering to very different listeners, or maybe to the same listener if you have very versatile taste. But also, kind of like I said with the Mammoth, these are not so modulated and sort of switched around that they're going to have a super polarizing sound. They might be a little bit niche maybe, but not nearly as kind of extreme in their modulation as, once again, I'm in reference the Honeydew and the Satsuma, because they feel kind of like these are supposed to be the more nuanced, kind of more expensive versions of those in a way. At least that's how I perceived them. Alright, so those are my thoughts on the Holocene. I am honestly a really huge fan of these. I love these, especially for the price from Campfire. If you're looking to get an entryway into the Campfire world, but you don't want to pay, over $1,000, or you want to pay under $1,000, these could be a great way to kind of get their, really high quality sound and kind of get somewhere in the ballpark of some of their much more expensive models without having to shell out all the cash. So these could be a great entryway into Campfire, and I think that these really do represent the brand very well. It's just a very versatile, balanced IEM, and it's something that I feel like I could recommend to a lot of different listeners across different tastes. So yeah, please comment if you have any questions I didn't answer in this video. I'll also link to Major Hi-Fi's IEM ranking tool if you want to compare these to other IEMs. And I will link to my written review on Major Hi-Fi per usual. And yeah, I will be back soon with some more reviews and videos, and until next time, happy listening.